former spoiled rotten kids. When did the real world really hit you? This wasn't me but my wife. She grew up well-to-do. I grew up in a trailer. Like I can't watch Trailer Park Boys because it's too real. Trailer. We met in college which took everything in my power to get to. She, on the other hand, had it all paid for. We met, fell in love, etc. The first break, I took her home to my parents. Again TPB, so drugs, dirty, dingy, broken trailer. She met everyone and was nice enough. That night we went to bed and I woke up to her just sobbing. She had never realized how great she really had it and how broken and rough the world can be. As to where I was just thankful to be home with my family on my nice bed, which in hindsight is the sketchiest thing ever. A bed with no sheets and alcohol stains and all that crap. Had I known what I know now about the upper middle class wealthy world, I would have never taken her home until I knew her better. I was surprised she stayed with me. I just grew up thinking that the way I lived was perfectly normal until I met her parents. I've had an odd experience. I grew up in extreme wealth then went to living very humbly. I'm half Saudi, so I had maids all my young life, practically wiped my ass. I remember whenever me and my bros got off the airplane and we were driven to the executive gold lounge. Basically, we were minted. However, my parents got divorced and my mother decided rightly I should live with her back in the UK. So I went from maids in a mansion, where my bedroom was bigger than most people's entire floor, in the UK at least, to sharing a tiny bedroom with my brothers. I remember my first time washing dishes at school and I did it with cold water and the other students laughed and said you're supposed to do it with warm/hot water. I went from buying whatever I wanted to buying second-hand school clothes, but it was the best thing to happen to me ever because holy crap, when I went back and met some of my old friends, their minds, they were just not normal people. This is when it really hit me, because I just saw how different they were. Fully grown men being catered for my maids in their old age. Do they have no shame? Rich coming from me, but hey, I mended my ways. Whenever I visit my father I see my stepbro who continued being spoiled. 35-year-old man, never had a job, leeches off his mum. Our maid is like 60. She cleans his clothes, washes his dishes, might as well squeeze his ass cheeks whilst he takes a dump. I refuse to let the maid do anything, and I give where I can from money I earned. To see such a difference is what made me grateful and hit me. I'm so damn glad I didn't continue growing up spoiled. Frankly, I didn't grow up poor either. My perspective of poverty was warped compared to real poverty. Our tiny shared bedroom was luxury. I've learned never to take anything for granted. I'm so glad I grew up normally. I couldn't stand the person I'd become if I continued growing up spoiled. I work hard now. I support my mother. I have pride, something I'd never have if I continued being a leech. I was a spoiled rotten child and also into my teen years. My parents bought me a brand new red convertible for my 16th birthday. I threw a fit over it because what I actually wanted was my brother's old car that we still had, which was dark blue in color. I was so shallow and a horrible person back then. So what really turned me around? That next summer I took a job as a camp counselor at a local day camp. I did not have to work, but I was bored and sounded like something easy to do. I was so wrong. This day camp was specifically geared to the lower classes who could not afford childcare during the summer. We served them breakfast, lunch, and an afternoon snack. For a lot of the camp kids this was all they would eat that day, and on Fridays they would beg for extra food/snacks to take home for themselves and or their siblings, because they may not get to eat again until Monday. This really hit me hard, but the part that got me the most. This one kid, around 5 to 6, would refuse to take their shoes and socks off, even if we were going to the public pool that day. I couldn't understand why until one day he came in limping, like his feet were causing him so much pain. I convinced him to let me help him get his shoes and socks, so I could see what might be bothering him. Once I did, it took everything in me not to break down right there. His socks were covered in blood. His poor tiny little feet were covered in sores and his toes seemed to curl under a bit. He was in so much pain from the state of his feet. As it turns out, he had been wearing shoes about 3 sizes too small. His family couldn't afford new shoes. I took my lunch break and went out to buy him new socks and a few pairs of shoes. This broke me, which I definitely needed. It changed my way of thinking forever. I grew up in Indonesia, a third world country where you definitely have maids if you're posting on Reddit. I grew up thinking it's common to have multiple maids. Moved to Singapore, a first world country where people still have maids, but it's more of an upper middle class and above thing. Got assigned to sweep the floors by the teachers, and that was my first time holding a broom. Swept it back and forth like in cartoons, and everyone was looking at me going, what the hell are you doing? Turns out I was just creating a dust cloud around me. You have to sweep in one direction and gather all the dust into the dustpan. Mind blown. This is the best answer in this thread. I was coming in here expecting I didn't realize people drove crappy cars. I was not expecting I didn't know how to use a broom. It took until I was in university to realize that most people don't just get everything they want. I was always just given what I asked for. We had a swimming pool and a tennis court, but when I said I wanted a zipline in the backyard it was like, okay, let's do that right now. Every time an overseas class trip was held, there was just no question I would go and be given money to do whatever I wanted. One trip to Italy, there was a girl who had worked on weekends to pay for half the trip. My first reaction was what the hell, why would you do that when your parents can just pay? Then I realized some parents can't just throw down money like that. It still took me a few years to realize that even having to pay for only half the trip was totally unfeasible to many people. First time I went a week living on beans and ramen, because that's what was in the house and I didn't have any money. I learned that in the real world, everything is not just handed to you. I'm still a bit spoiled, and I still have issues with prioritizing expenditures. But I'm much better than I was when I was 21. I lived overseas as a child, and we had a lot of luxuries. A large house, a personal driver, a maid/nanny, etc. Whenever we moved to another country overseas we had a fully furnished house waiting for us, movers to help us pack, people to pick us up from the airport and help us get settled in, etc. We didn't have to pay bills either because that was all covered by my dad's job. The first time we moved back to the US was when I was around 10. We had to stay at my grandparents and I didn't understand why we had no house waiting for us. When we finally bought a house, I was shocked that it was empty. Who can live in an empty house? When we bought all our furniture, we had no cable TV/internet, which I didn't understand either. Dad obviously wanted to save money by not paying for those types of costs, but I didn't realize these were things we had to pay for. I thought it was all included in the nice house that is just given to us by the world. The first few years back in the US were a huge shock to me as I slowly started to understand how the world works. Thank you for watching Internet's Funniest. Please like, share, and subscribe for more.